All right, folks, welcome aboard the Wednesday edition of the Steve Malzberg Show. Ben Stein and Dinesh D'Souza, they're on deck. But first, a couple of things. As we mentioned, the Keystone, the Republicans were unable to override in the Senate the veto of Keystone by Barack Obama. Let the chips fall where they may there. And we have so many more concerns with Barack Obama. Before we get to everything, and before we get to Ferguson, and before we get to Hillary, and before we get to the Homeland Security, Bill O'Reilly did something yesterday. Now, he's used from time to time portions of interviews that I've done on this show and then had a panel on to debate them, controversial statements that I've gotten out of some of my guests. But he did something really above and beyond yesterday. And I'd like to personally thank him on behalf of Newsmax. I mean, I can't personally thank him on behalf of Newsmax. If it's personal, it's not on behalf of Newsmax. But how about a little of both? Here's what he said yesterday on the O'Reilly Factor on the Fox News channel.
And finally tonight, the Factor Tip of the Day. Last night we had a segment on how nasty the upcoming presidential campaign is likely to be because of the defamatory websites. Well, there are some exceptions to the sewer. Check out Newsmax.com. Has some very interesting political analysis. Chris Ruddy and the guys actually try to gather facts, which is refreshing. Factor Tip of the Day.
A Factor Tip of the Day. Well, that's great. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that from Bill O'Reilly. Okay. As we speak, Eric Holder is speaking. Two things today. One, and to me the most important one, is that Bill's trying to intrude back on the show. You know, we already played it, Bill. That's enough. No, I'm only kidding. Ferguson, the Darren Wilson, the police officer in the Michael Brown shooting, will not be indicted on federal civil rights violation charges. Now, this is much, in my opinion, to the chagrin of Eric Holder, who couldn't bring federal civil rights charges against George Zimmerman, although he tried for 3 years. And he couldn't bring it against Darren Wilson. Why? Because in each case, people were legitimately defending themselves. One a civilian, who was not a watchman on duty, despite what you hear, who was not told to stay in his car by the emergency telephone police operator, despite what you hear. He was defending himself because he was getting beaten to a pulp, okay? Ferguson was an open and shut case of a cop defending himself. A jury found that, as they did in the George Zimmerman case. They found that he was defending himself. And obviously, Eric Holder in both cases found nobody was out to go get a black kid or a black man or a black person. This is the fantasy of the media and the fantasy of the protesters in the streets. And, I'm sorry to say, the fantasy of our president. If I had a son, he would have looked like Trayvon. They sent three people to Michael Brown's funeral. A thug who beat up a cop and would have killed a cop, in my opinion, if he could have. 3 people to that funeral. Nobody to the march in France. What's wrong with that picture? So anyway, but Eric Holder did manage, and I haven't read the full report. Full disclosure, I have not read it. But he did manage to bring charges, which he's talking about now, about police bias in Ferguson. There might be some legitimate claims there. For instance, I understand they found an email from a former police officer or a police officer back in 2009 or 8 or something along those lines, disparaging Barack Obama because he's a black man. That person should be fired and that person should go. There's no question about that. But I'm a little confused. They cite the statistics, and all the networks were doing it today on the screen. 85% of those stopped are black, 90% of the arrested are black, blah, 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 black. Ferguson is a 70 or about 70, 71%, from what I could make out, black community. So 77 out of 10 people there are black. Now, I don't know but in general, we know in cities, we know that blacks commit a disproportionate amount of the crime. So if you're telling me a town is 70% black, and that blacks make up the overwhelming majority of those stopped, arrested, put in jail, I say, okay, yeah, and so? Now, if the Attorney General has evidence that this is done purposely, then whoever is doing this should be fired and put on trial. But if it's based on these statistics, what are you supposed to do? Well, let's see, Ferguson is 70% black and 85% of the car stops are black, and that's disproportionate. Give me a break. Is that how you want your police force to run? Oh, no, we can't stop that guy. We already hit our quota for white people. I mean, what? So, unfortunately, that's what we've deteriorated to in many respects in this country. And believe me, Eric Holder, the man who said, when he announced there were no civil rights violation charges against George Zimmerman, he said we need to lower the standards. Why? Because he failed. He couldn't get these guys on civil rights charges because they did nothing wrong according to the law. Let's change the law and make it so that they did do something wrong. Woohoo! Ben Stein's next.